Hey humans, how's it going? Susan Ruth here. Thanks for listening to another episode of Hey Human Podcast. This is episode 368, and I had a conversation with Geoff Russell. Geoff has over 40 years of experience in the sport of fencing as a competitor, coach, and club owner. After his wife's death, he hit rock bottom, but he's picked himself up, and he's been sober 5.5 years now. He's an avid adventurer on foot and bike trails alike, and he's currently working towards seeing his Amy M. Fortune Foundation come to life. Its mission focused on, quote, enabling participation, enriching lives, and elevating communities. He's a very dear friend of mine. I was really happy that he said yes to coming on the show, and I think you're going to get a lot out of this episode. Check out heyhumanpodcast.com for links and to learn more about my guests and the show. Check out susanruth.com to learn more about me and my other artistic endeavors. Follow Susan Ruthism and Hey Human Podcast on social media. You can find my albums on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, or wherever you get your music. Look for my album All I Ever Wanted Was Everything and How to Say Goodbye. Those are probably my two favorites. Also, check out my relationships and sex show with sexologist and healthcare practitioner Mara Edelman. It's on YouTube, called Are We There Yet Podcast Show. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. And thank you for listening. And thank you for spreading the word and sharing this with everyone you know. I really appreciate it. Be well, stay safe, take care of each other. All right, here we go. Geoff Russell, welcome to Hey Human.
Susan, thank you for having me.
It's good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
Welcome to my humble abode.
I love it.
We are here to talk about you. How do you feel about that?
I feel fine. If I give myself too much time to think about it, I might have come up with an excuse not to show up. But
I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, I'm just going to be in the moment.
That's a good place to be. Where are you from?
Venice, California.
You're a unicorn.
Yes, born and raised. And actually not Venice Beach proper, but Venice zip code.
What was growing up like?
Traditional square block neighborhood. Couple of friends in the neighborhood. Run around, try not to get in trouble. Different than it is now.
Yeah.
Just as far as the access that we had
well,
to the neighborhood.
You grew up in a time when the door would open in the morning and you were supposed to come home later that night at some point for dinner.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the
generation.
Rule was,
oh, we have children.
the rule was come back before nightfall.
Yeah.
So especially during the summer, we would just be out playing around at other people's houses, hanging out, going to the park. There was a park close to where I grew up, and just having the best time. And it's getting dark. We got to go home. I
saw a funny TikTok the other day, and it said, "I don't understand. Why did Generation X have to drink from hoses? Why not just go inside?" And the response was hilarious. It's, well, we weren't allowed inside. The door opened in the morning, and they didn't want to see your face in that house until nightfall, if not later.
And that's great because I drinking out of a hose is just normal.
Yeah.
It was just normal for us growing up. You want some water, you find a hose. There's hoses all over the place.
That's right. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
God, it hurts my brain to think that we grew up in a time now that a lot of people think of as the olden days.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, completely.
It's annoying, isn't it?
Well, the thing that gets me is watching movies that are dated, and they're dated to the 80s.
80s and 90s,
yeah.
Both, yeah.
And I don't think about it that way until I see it. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was... So and just weird. everything about it too. The cars, the dress, and living it and then having it as a reference point. It's like, wow, okay.
Yeah, so bizarre. Family was close?
Yes, and my grandparents on my mother's side were close, and her sister was close, so there was an extended family that was always getting together for all the holidays, spending nights at cousins' houses and back and forth. So there was a lot of family time.
And were you close with your sibling, with your sister?
Yes, we actually did a lot of traveling together when we were younger. My dad's job would take him around the country, and instead of flying to those consulting assignments, we packed up a trailer and were able to drive all across the country for basically 3 months every summer for probably about 9 to 10 years, and it was phenomenal. at the time, it was just something we did. As I look back now, what a phenomenal experience.
Mm-hmm. And your dad is in education?
He's in education, yes. He's a teacher and also an educational consultant. And so he spent a lot of time traveling around the country, and in some cases the world, offering education consulting to different school districts and programs.
He's a famous school guy, right?
He, one of his colleagues, Dr. Madeline Hunter, is a psychologist, and in the realm of education, and just spent years and years and years traveling the country and the world, offering programs.
Together, both of them?
Mostly her, and then they would do programs together in the United States, and sometimes out of the United States as well. And so there were several years where they were traveling around doing programs together.
Did that create any pressure for you growing up to do better in school, or that you had to somehow not be psychoanalyzed by your dad's friends, things like that? Did that occur to you?
I'm not sure. If I would have to probably really sit down and think about it. I tend to not think so as my first response, because we started traveling and being exposed to his colleagues and the ideas that they would share and talk about from an early age. So it just became normal. It became natural for me to have conversations with people that he was working with all the time, different educators. And he never had rules, but he was always suggestions as far as thinking about more than just a one-word response. So when somebody, because we spent a lot of time with adults, there were some kids around at some of the events, but since we were traveling together, we were always at the events. So he was suggesting that if anyone asks you a question, try to come up with something more than a one-word response. So that was always fun.
Engagement.
Yeah, exactly. That was always fun.
God forbid.
Yes.
Sorry about the distraction. My next door neighbor is the facility, and they can get pretty loud. So apologies to anyone listening, and apologies to you if it's a bit distracting. Hang in there is all I'm saying.
Thank you.
What made you decide to go into fencing?
Traditional sports. I was always involved in traditional sports, and I could play them for sure, and I was always active. But there was something about them that just didn't call me 100%. And somehow advertisement, and this is before internet, but I got a hold of something. I don't know if I saw a book, and it was about fencing.
A flyer next to the water hose?
A flyer next to the water hose, yeah. There was someone that was trying to drum up some business. And I was able to call the organization, or I possibly even sent a letter to get some more information about fencing in my area. And I got this huge dot matrix. People can look that up. A dot matrix printed report of all the different clubs in California. There happened to be one that was relocating just probably like 20 minutes from my house in Culver City. So it was convenient. So I went and gave it a try, and initially it stuck, and then I wanted to take a break for a little bit, and then I had signed up for a summer camp. I didn't want to go to the summer camp, but my mother said, you signed up for it, let's see it through, and if you want to stop after that, you can. And then that was just great.
What was it about fencing you liked?
The connection, the mind-body, the thinking really quickly, the immediacy of it. People refer to it a lot as physical chess, and it's demanding physically as well, especially when you're training regularly and depending on the level that you want to fence at and what the goals are. But it was just the physical and mental aspect of it all at the same time.
And the sweat box of a suit that you're in during the summer.
And that's something that you definitely get used to. And
you had aspirations to go into the Olympics.
I did. All my teammates and I, that we all started at the same time, and we formed kind of a group of four that was really supportive of each other, and we just naturally pushed each other, all in a positive way. We didn't realize it at the time, but when we look back, it was completely positive and supportive of each other. And we all got recruited to college. We all went to college. We had particular plans as far as when we were going to be on what Olympic teams, and one of our buddies ended up making a couple Olympic teams, and then we all kind of went off on our own as far as training. And my focus changed when I got to college, which obviously there's a lot of stuff that's happening in college, and I think I closed myself off to certain possibilities, but when...
What do you mean?
Well, just being able to experience the college experience and the learning aspect of it, and then the what I went there for as far as being recruited and the training that goes along with that, and just having a healthy balance. And I think a lot of my choices back at the time were kind of an all or nothing. So if I was being confronted with maybe my training or what was next for me, it was easier to put my sights on something else and focus on that, and then step away from the training.
Do you mean like as you got anxious over an expectation, you toggled to something else?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Had you always been like that, even as a kid?
Yes. Yeah, it started probably, there was a couple of instances where I felt like I was being challenged in front of a group, and instead of possibly asking for help or say, hey, you know, I'm not sure what to do next, I just really internalized it and then shut down. And there was some behavior from teachers at that time that allowed me to reinforce that on myself. So,
meaning bad teachers?
Teachers that just had a certain way of doing things, and there was no issues with parading somebody in front of the class and talking about grades or expectations that the teacher thought about the individual. So that was kind of interesting, and I just turned away from that really quickly. I'm like, hey, I'm not going to subject myself to that.
Humiliation tactic.
Yes.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
How were you feeling about drifting away from the sport that you were sent to school to do? That must have been a heavy expectation.
Yes, and there was a lot of regret. There's a lot of regret, and I tried to put a happy spin on it, but I could only do that so much, and so I pulled back even more.
Which was the regret part? The walking away or the
walking away? Yeah, one of my teammates very, very gently just let me know after people were talking to try to get me to stay, because I was competing regularly for 2 years, and then I walked away from the team. And one of my coaches was not happy about it, but was still trying to be positive. But he kept saying, because I quit whenever we'd interact, you know, and the quit thing came up, and I was really resistant to that. And I didn't quit; I had to do other things. But in all reality, I did. I couldn't. It was just too confronting. The expectation, and then where I felt I was as far as producing, and instead of just sitting down and having a conversation around it and using the network of community that was available to me, I just walked away. And it seemed like it was easier, but it built up a lot of resentment and regret all at the same time for years.
Did you grow up in a family that did not talk about their feelings or did not know? Because sometimes as educators, I'm going to use my parents as examples. They're both academia people. So they are more in their head than in their bodies when it comes to fostering, is I suppose a good word, emotional response from kids. Did you experience that in your house?
Yes, I did. And the conversation would start, and then it wouldn't go anywhere beyond that. So it was kind of like an invitation to have a conversation, but then it required either my parents or myself stepping through that door, accepting the invitation either way, and saying, "Hey, I want to talk about this more." Mm-hmm. And there's times when it did happen, especially when I was getting older, and there's times when I realized that it didn't seem like it was an option.
Did you lose your scholarship at college?
At that time, there was very, very few scholarships. I know at my school they had 1.5 scholarships at the time. Now it's completely different. So they would take that and spread it around to people that really needed it at the time. So there wasn't a scholarship attached to my participation.
Okay.
But then there was a lot of disappointment, a lot of upset, a lot of uncertainty and concern as well. Some people were concerned with me being gung-ho and participating, and also the level that I was fencing on the varsity team. And then that just all went away. And it went away, when I think about it, it went away really quickly. I think it was just one summer or something came up for me. I was getting ready to go overseas and train for 6 months, and I just couldn't. It just seemed too big. It seemed too big, and all the things that I would possibly have to work through. I'm sure I'm going over by myself. And the fencing community is just a huge community, and I would have been completely supported. And again, coming back to just reaching out and talking to somebody about it. And
hindsight, say, hey, right? 2020.
Hindsight. I'm feeling anxious about this. I need some coaching. I need some help around it. So I just shut it down, because that's always the best thing to do, right? Just shut it down. Just walk away. Wasn't meant to be. But it was tough. It was tough. So my teammates didn't know how to talk to me.
How did you carry that through the rest of your college days? Did you graduate from college?
I did not graduate. I stayed there for 2 more years, and I I probably was like maybe a semester away.
Wow, what made you quit?
From frustration. Just frustration. I'm sure there was a lot of the regret and the resentment that was building up, and just not feeling satisfied with how I was participating in school. I took a introduction to theater class my freshman year and just loved it. And there was just that self-expression and just everything about it. And I certainly could have participated in the theater department, not being a theater major, but I was all or nothing. I'm going to be a theater major. And there's parts of it that I really, really enjoyed. And there's other parts I was like, why am I even doing this? And I almost felt obligated. And then when I start to go down that road, then it's figuring out how to just get out, which I started to do with the fencing. So the pattern continued. Mm-hmm. So I just didn't continue to fulfill even some of the basic requirements.
Did your parents have anything to say about that?
They did, through listening, but there wasn't any type of I'm putting this in quotes, intervention.
No plan was put in place, or
no
any
plan
help.
Was really put in place, and I think they were going off of what I was saying.
In retrospect, are you irritated by that, or are you glad that they didn't push you?
That's I think there's parts. There's a part of me that's like, why couldn't you fight for me, type of a response. But I don't think that's the prevailing response. I think just a lot of the upbringing that I experienced was embracing the experience and going back to the conversations, having certain conversations, and especially being educators, but just parents in general. I remember my dad talking to me specifically one time about just doing the best that he could, as if it was a bad thing. When we were talking, this was years ago, when we were talking about different things.
About he himself doing?
Yeah, yeah, just doing the best that he could as a parent, as if he was making judgments about that. And that's all we can do. And I think in the moment they were uncertain how to progress with the conversation, because they didn't want to ostracize me in any way, but then still give me an opportunity to really think about what I want to do in the moment, but also looking future as well. And I completely could have changed my major. I could have stayed. I've had a lot of time to think about how I would have done it.
Do you ever think about going back and finishing?
I do. Yeah, I do. And what would that look like? And applying whatever credits I can, but also just starting over, just finding something that just calls to me. And if I want to go back to school and continue my education, I certainly can. Which wasn't accessible to me years ago. It was just too terrifying.
What happened when you left college?
I followed my heart, Susan. I followed my heart. My girlfriend at the time was living in New Jersey, so that became my next focus point. It's like it was an opportunity for me to leave school legitimately. I'm in love. So I went to New Jersey and hung out for probably 8-9 months.
With the girlfriend?
We weren't living together. She was still living at home, and I had a little apartment. And I found a coaching job, a fencing coaching job at a high school, which was actually just really a lot of fun. Just the patterns that I've talked about just came into play, and I'm like, I'll go home now, and then I'll start training again. I was going to start training again, and
you broke up with the girl.
I did not. No, just decided to go back home, and we were going to
long distance
continue the long distance.
Did you notice in any of the kids that you were training that they were that any of them were on the path that you were on, where the glimmer was starting to fade, but they maybe had talent but didn't know where to put everything, which boxes to put it all in?
I don't think I was from a specific just teaching the sport, and these were high school kids. I don't think I was necessarily listening that way back then. Specifically around the sport, everyone was being engaged and having a good time. But as I look back now, there's a lot of lot of experiences that people are getting when they're 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. And, you have your foundation activities that provide community and teamwork and all that. And then there's everything that happens outside of that. And for me, the focus was just being responsible for the athletic part of it, the sport part of it. So I had my time there, and then I would move on.
And you came back to California?
Came back to California. I inched back into my house, my driveway, with maybe like fumes in the car. It was a quick trip across the country.
When you said to your then girlfriend, I think I'm going to make this change, was there something brewing in you, or was it simply, there's a job, I'm going to go take it? Because it seems that up until that point, you reacted. You weren't really action, you were reaction. Was that the case there?
Yes, and there was no job that I was moving. I was just moving back home.
What caused that?
The same things that I was feeling when I was fencing, but also in school. It's just the lack of. There was nothing that was motivating me there, and it was still just kind of the whole discovering who I am, where my focus is.
And how old are you at that point?
Let's see, I was 22 years after I went to Santa Monica City College for 2 years, basically a year and a half. And then once I got into college, once I basically transferred. Actually, I didn't transfer because I went in as a freshman.
Wait, you came back and went to school again?
No, this is
beforehand.
Beforehand, yeah. So I was 2 years older than freshman. So then I think I was 22, 23, 24.
And did you go back to your parents' place?
Yeah, I went back, got a couch, slept on the couch for a little bit, and then ended up moving out. But everything at that point, like, I didn't feel like I was being motivated, or I wasn't motivating myself, and didn't seem like there was any prospects. And then the safety of home, the idea of home, came into the brain, and so there was some relief attached to it. So of course I latched right onto that, and I'm going home. I just packed my stuff up, packed my car up, and drove across country. But
there wasn't any kind of breakup or anything like that. You were just, this is what I'm gonna.
Yes,
do.
We're just going to continue.
How did she take that?
I'm trying to think about the conversation and how it went. And I don't know if I can actually remember how the conversation went, and if it's something that I'm sure I didn't. Since I decided I was going to go, I was just going to go, and then we'll figure everything out. And probably not. Of course, not taking responsibility for having a more correct conversation at the time. Mm-hmm. And then this is what we're going to work on, this is what we're going to do, if we're going to continue the relationship, if you still want to, if it's something we both want to work on, and then make the drive. I think it was just, I got to get out of town.
I'm out of here.
I got to get out of town. Yeah. And it's
how long until you broke up after that?
Let's see, because she did come out to visit me, so probably maybe 4 to 6 months. Probably 4 to 6 months. Mm-hmm. And I think it was also a passive way of
getting out of something.
Yeah, and just letting it run its course.
Mm-hmm.
So, thanks for bringing that up, Susan.
You're welcome.
No, it's good. It's good.
You're back in California, and you are on mom and dad's couch, and you're trying to figure out what's next, and then you decide you're going to coach again?
No, I was going to train. I was going to start training again.
Oh, okay.
And I just basically didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know where, and so fencing had always been part of my life at that point, so I just it was my safety net mechanism, and I hung it on, I'll start training again, and then I ended up getting a job just working in the equipment store that they had at the fencing center, so I was around my community, and I was still able to train and be of service at the equipment store. And then I think I got a job soon after that at Staples. And I was working at Staples for a little while, but still just kind of doing a variety of things, not really committing to one thing. And that was it. That was it for a little while. And I think truly, just from a passion point of view, I knew that I didn't really want to. The fencing is one thing, and I can certainly continue to fence, participate as much as I want to, and get what I get out of it. But as far as setting myself up by saying, I'm going to start training for the Olympics. I'm going to start training and go to national competitions. And I did a couple, and then I just realized just the focus, the motivation wasn't there, the passion wasn't there, and I enjoyed it, but it wasn't what I was really looking for at the moment. It's not what I wanted to focus on.
Do you think you set yourself up for that? In a way?
Certainly, yeah, certainly. And that's part of that grandiose behavior as far as I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna make the Olympic team. And I was certainly on an Olympic path at some point, or actually a high national level path at some point, and then veered away from that. But then pulled that out of the hat every once in a while to set that bar really high.
Hearing all of this, it's very interesting, knowing what I know about you, which we will unfold and unfurl as we go. Do you think that was an indicator of addictive personality?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, and part of it's just kind of the all or nothing, and it almost takes me out of the equation as far as not having to think about something or just participate openly, and if it's something that I enjoy doing or if it's a person that I enjoy spending time with, but it's the all or nothing aspect of it. And you offered up the addictive personality part of it. That comes into play for sure.
Yeah. What happens next?
My grandfather passed away, and I moved in. See, we're back in '94, and I ended up sharing an apartment with the manager of the fencing center for a couple of months. But before that, I moved in with my grandmother because she was living in her house in Silver Lake by herself, and there was plenty of room, and so I wanted to get out of my parents' house just because I needed to give them their space, and the couch was only available for so long. But also my grandmother loved the company, and I really enjoyed spending time with her, and so I was able to help her out, and then I was able to find a little bit of balance on my own with moving into an apartment with my friend that was running the fencing center at the time, and that lasted probably about 8 months.
And then you meet Amy.
Then I meet Amy, yeah. It's just. And
Amy was a coach, or was she a student?
She was an adult fencer, and she had started another club, and then came over to try the club I was at, which is the largest club in California, and everyone in Southern California at that time ended up at that club at some point. And it's just one of those things, I want to say it was those eyes locked in across a crowded room, but I think it was me. And then she was involved with somebody at the time, but the conversation just started.
And she's older than you at this point.
She's older. Yeah.
She's always older than you.
She's always older. Yeah, she's older.
Yeah. By how many years?
7 years.
7 years older.
7 years. Yeah.
Interesting. Do you think part of you was drawn to the older energy of this is somebody that can tell me how to be?
Yeah. There's just some safety in that. Just for as far as society says, which I don't subscribe to, but just as a starting point, I was a late bloomer. And I know I bloomed when I bloomed. I'm still blooming. So there was a part of the safety of it, someone that that can kind of work me through the process and take care of me and be safe. So then there's just the energy.
Sure.
I mean, how do we decide?
You can't quantify it.
How do we decide? Yeah.
Yeah, it just is what it is.
There's a lot of people that would come through the fencing center, but for whatever reason, hey.
Yeah.
Who's that over there? I divide my time, and then she let me know when she was finished with that relationship. It was at some tournament.
Were you developing a friendship all along?
Yeah, especially for fencing. I know other sports are the same, but the way that we train, it's indoors. For the most part, it's after work as far as the adults are concerned, and people will go there either they have dinner before, or they'll go over there right from the work, and people are training and working out together and in an intense environment for a couple hours a night, and sometimes 3-4 nights a week, depending on how they want to participate.
You hear that, singles? Sounds like fencing might be the place to meet a person.
There's a lot of bonding. We go out and eat dinner afterwards and just hang out. And again, community is a big theme for me these days, and it was just a wonderful community. And then people would go to their other lives and then meet 3 or 4 times a week to poke each other, just to have a good time in a physical environment, which is great.
And you and Amy started dating and immediately got serious.
Yes. Yeah, our first date, we went to 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
The movie?
The movie, yes. We didn't actually go to 4 Weddings and a Funeral.
I mean, it's worth asking.
That would be a good way. It would be a good first date. And I remember going to that, and I think then we were not together for a week. We'd see each other at the fencing center, but after the first date. But then after that, it was basically we were inseparable.
Game on.
Yeah.
From the beginning, did you think this is the person I'm going to marry?
Well, my all-in personality, and I've had years to think about it. I was, there was no, and there was a lot of assuming when I think about it now. But I was just all in right from the beginning, and so whatever course that took. And I think there was a traditional approach as far as having a certain amount of time, and then getting married, and then the family and everything that goes along with that. And I think there's a certain instinct, something it seemed like I didn't have to think about. This is the way you do things. So there's almost I don't want it to come across incorrectly, but it almost was like an obligation starting to
expectation, at least.
Yeah, that's better. An expectation as far as the obligation comes later. The expectation as far as this is the way that it goes. Mm-hmm. And there's some naive qualities to that as well too.
Was this the first time you'd felt truly in love?
No, there was 2 college girlfriends, both of them lasting about a year and a half.
You were a virgin when you got with
Yes.
Amy. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's interesting to me, if you're willing to talk about it.
Yeah.
Especially because I think there's...
We can always edit it out if I choose to later.
If you panic. That there's an assumption, let's say, gender males have a proclivity to have sex as soon as humanly possible, whenever possible.
Right.
But here you say you were in 2 long-term relationships and you didn't have sex. Why do you think that is?
There's some insecurity around that as well. There was some excitement too, thinking about that. We had my college girlfriends and I. We both had conversations around that, and there was just a conscious choice to wait.
Not religious,
not religious. No, a little bit on one, but for the most part, just based on the conversations. But a part of it was just a comfort level, just not to add that because we were just having such a good time together. And there's a lot of things you can do without having sex. And
cribbage. You can do cribbage.
Cribbage, yes.
And Uno.
Yes. No, I know.
I love Uno.
Yeah. If you know, you know. And now you're making me blush.
I'm sorry.
No, that's good. I like the feeling.
I love that we can speak in a dirty joke in there.
So it was one more thing to add to the mix, the responsibility and everything that goes along with that. And it was just safer. It was just emotionally, and also probably just emotionally. Yes, and as far as the male proclivity, the college age, there was a lot of pressure, a lot of conversation, and I became pretty good about steering conversations away. People always wanted to know what my situation was, and they also steered the conversation, in certain ways. But there was an idea that the college males have to be a certain way, especially back in the at that time.
Sure. Did you feel any pressure? Did people come and say, "Oh, are you gay or something? Why are you not sleeping with your girlfriends?" Or did you have any of that kind of?
I didn't get any of that pressure.
Era, there was a lot of like, "What are you gay?" Or as if that was some sort of a bad thing. But
I never got any pressure like that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, it was great. Never got any pressure. I mean, I didn't offer up.
Sure.
Lots of opportunities for conversation around that. But with a few of my closer teammates, if the question came up, it wasn't like I was leading with that, but if anyone came up, I was fine with talking about it.
What do you think was different about Amy that you thought, oh, right, now I'm going to do the sex thing?
I don't know.
Or older woman, maybe.
Possibly. It's interesting how I think about it now as far as starting a relationship with somebody and definitely pursuing that part of a relationship and having fun with it without the all or nothing approach to it. Which comes back later for me as well, because Amy and I were together for 20 years. And there's a certain approach that I thought was needed to experience certain things in a relationship. You have to get married. And
you mean you thought in order to have sex you should get married?
Yeah, going forward beyond that, after the time with Amy was over.
Okay, hold on. I want to make sure I understand this. You're saying that after Amy, you believed that you shouldn't have sex with anyone unless you were married. That was your belief system then?
I don't think it was an overt belief system. I just think it was from a safety point of view.
You mean like STDs?
No, just as far as emotional comfort.
Got it.
Emotional comfort, thank you. Yeah, emotional comfort. And again, going back to I never casually dated. Never had casual sex before, so it wasn't on my radar.
You didn't have any practice at that.
There's no practice, yeah, and it's certainly something that I can be. If I'm open to the conversation, great. I can participate how I see fit. But if I shut it down, then the only option for me is
it's all or nothing.
All or nothing.
Sure.
All or nothing.
Which feeds perfectly into what you were.
Right.
Yeah. So you meet Amy.
Yes.
You fall in love.
Yes.
And you start dating, and then you fall in love, whichever order it went in.
We moved in. She was living with a roommate. They had actually got a house together. And so we moved in together and got engaged.
And from the start of your relationship, was she already saying things like, I don't want to grow old, or I don't want to be old? Or, because I know that was kind of a part of her rhetoric.
That came later. That whole first year just...
blissed out.
Yeah, I just learned, just the adventures, just learning about each other. We had the fencing as a sport. I ended up becoming her coach. And
you were her coach?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
Taking over the coaching duties, and she was starting to compete more regularly. And
how was that, combining those two worlds?
It was tough.
Yeah, I bet.
It was really tough. It was really tough in the beginning to separate that, and we had to work at it together, and I also had to work at it myself, just to really take the ego out and not personalize it, but also set boundaries around that. And that took a while. That took a long time.
I bet, yeah.
And I'm laughing because when I think about it, I'm like, wow, we survived that.
Yeah, because let's be honest, that's got to be a tricky scenario.
Yes.
She was a champion too, wasn't she?
Yes.
Yeah.
And she was not a gray area person. It was black and white, which is actually interesting thinking about the addictive personality approach. I mean, when she would lock into something, that was it. There was nothing else. And so consequently, when she would get pushed over the edge about something emotionally, and whatever emotion was there, if she got angry about something, that was it. And she couldn't see anything else. And that made her a really fierce competitor, which is fantastic. She's probably one of the greatest competitors that I've ever experienced and seen, just from her mindset. But it came with a toll. I mean, there was a huge price to pay emotionally, because she was never, and these are my observations and words over time, but she was never satisfied. And you'll often find that is the case with people that are participating in any competitive sport that requires a lot of training and technical proficiency, because they're the wins, and I'm putting that in quotes, the wins are fleeting.
Yeah, and they're immediately looking for the next thing.
Completely, and it's almost like getting a fix.
It is absolutely. It's not even almost like it. I would say that it is like that.
And somehow
that winning too can be addictive. That's the thing that I think is an important thing to mention in talking about any kind of addiction behavior. It doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. And I've said that before on the show. It can be running, it can be eating, it can be feeling anger. That can be addictive. We see that all over social media, right? There's all sorts of things that will kick off that part of the brain. And for you, I imagine having a personality that is all or nothing emotionally, when you're used to running far away from emotions, what an interesting combination for a couple.
It was very, very interesting because there was and there's that instinct to help, but also knowing that help is giving space, and help can take the form of not looking like help by separation, in the sense of not having to be on the person all the time and trying to get in there and fix it. There's a process to it, and in the beginning I was internalizing, personalize everything, and it was emotionally really draining. And I didn't realize it at the time. It was afterwards I would look back, I'm like, wow, I invested far more than I needed to be the best advocate for her, coach, but also husband, confidant, friend, all that. And the other part to that is knowing that I can't fulfill all those roles. It's not my role to do that. And that was part of the all or nothing, like somehow, and it came back on me like somehow I'm a failure or I'm less than because I couldn't provide all that. And that's not my role to do that. And I think in the beginning, when we were doing the dance and trying to figure it out, there was parts of the coaching environment that were really great for both of us. And there was other parts that were holding both of us back that we just didn't have conversations around, which was part of our marriage as well. And it's kind of interesting. In some cases we're really great at the coach-student relationship, and other times we were really great at being husband and wife, and it's interesting for me to look at how to merge those two so we can just have the best experience possible in the moment and everything that goes along with that. Like there was times where I didn't want to be married to Amy, and I didn't know how to have those conversations with her, because there was definitely an opportunity for us to have conversations. And again, my patterns came up, and it's like, I'll maybe talk about it with somebody else, and then even looking at, well, how can I get out of this? Like I'm going to be somehow better or served by getting out of it, as opposed to leaning into it and let's have a conversation about it.
Why do you think it was that you didn't run in this scenario?
I think in sitting here now, having you ask me that question, because I knew there was a better option, and also there's the love that was completely present, and I don't want to automatically say because I loved her, because there's a lot that goes in with that. There's a lot that goes with that. So it's not just an obvious because I loved her and that's it. That's just the beginning of the conversation. So I knew that there was something more. It just comes up as there was a better way to do things. And also I wasn't satisfied with the way I'd responded to things in the past.
So you're developing a self-awareness.
Self-awareness, yes. Yeah, just of the pattern, and maybe not being able to verbalize it,
sure,
but more reactive, and it seemed like I was reacting less a certain way with those things. And maybe because she was really reactive she took on that role, and so maybe it was possible for me to satisfy that need to react a certain way, but she was doing it, and then, I could come in and fix it. That's in quotes too.
Sure. How long into your marriage was she diagnosed, and did you notice anything leading up to that? Were there signs that something was amiss?
There was only some swelling, some waxing and waning swelling that was happening around her thyroid gland in her neck, and but as far as anything physical beyond that, anything. Just in her behavior or, mental state, there was nothing other than just feeling like she was having the onset of a flu or something like that. One of the parents of a client her father went through the same thing, and just based on the way the swelling, she said to Amy, you should have this go checked out. And actually, Amy did go, and it took us a year to get a diagnosis, going through the process and the time, and getting the test, and some of the tests not being conclusive. And the other thing is that we found that the doctors, the ones that we were seeing and participating with in the programs, were really hesitant about testing for certain things based on the percentages, but also then giving the news. And Amy was very, like I said, she was very direct with stuff like that. She didn't want someone to beat around the bush. If I got something to deal with, tell me. And she was really upset when the diagnosis for lymphoma first came back, because she felt she lost a whole year of being able to treatment and everything that went along with that.
Yeah.
And anyway, so then that started a whole nother phase of our relationship as it started to progress, and with our business that we had at the time and treatments and everything. We actually opened a fencing club, and I was still working at the other place. Mm-hmm. And that was a whole nother dynamic, being owners, married, coach. I mean,
you really intermix stuff.
It was 24/7.
So what happens next? She's been diagnosed, and that has to be, especially for somebody who is a champion athletic person, to be given this information that there is a tiny thing in your body that's going to try and destroy you from the inside out. I mean,
right.
How do you wrap your head around that?
I'm still wrapping my head around it, and that was years ago. We went through the diagnosis, and we got with a specialist, an oncologist that deals with that type of lymphoma specifically, and got all the typing, which is more testing, and basically started a chemotherapy. I know they have immunotherapy options now that are really effective. Chemotherapy was really the only option back then, and she was upset about that, because it's basically the analogy at the time that someone shared with her was, it's like firebombing the inside of a house to kill a cockroach. And that's what she said she felt like when she started to go through the process more. In the beginning, there's kind of an excitement, there's a relief that, I'm going to take care of this, and then the reality of it. and everyone's body handles it differently, so there's no one thing, and it just crushed her from the mentally, but also from the inside as well. Just her body was just started completely changing, and I think that's when the getting back to what you asked earlier, I think that's when the conversations first started, because her family has a history of cancer, and she was hoping that it would skip her generation. She definitely was hoping that it would skip her brother, because of his family and his children and everything, and her brother's fine, but it got her. And I think early on she was convinced, and she shared as much. It's not a matter of if it gets her as far as it takes her life, but when. And I think she started to, even though the treatments in the beginning were successful, I think she started to kind of change her mindset around that, which was great from a competitor's point of view, because she had nothing to lose when she would go out there and compete, once she got to a point when she could start competing again, and she was just unstoppable in certain situations. And then all the energy would go into that, and there wasn't a lot left for her regular living.
How did her cancer create a cancer for you two?
Well, I became a caregiver, and not full-blown caregiver right away, but the focus changed as far as when she was feeling great, she was feeling great. And when we got almost 18 months after the first chemotherapy, and then she relapsed. If you don't have a relapse, anything noticeable beyond 2 years, the percentages go way up as far as longevity. But it was 18 months, and then we did a stem cell transplant, and that was a whole different experience. And then there was another 18 months basically after that. And then for those that don't know, a stem cell transplant is basically a complete reset of the body, the system. I think we got maybe 6 months, 8 months, and then she had some episodes that started to come up, and we're going to require different treatment. And there were some other oral options that might be available, but her options were limited, because the more you treat it with the same thing, the less effective it is, to the point where it's just doing more damage.
Were you starting to see her give up then?
There was moments, and
that's a hell of a lot to put your body through for anyone.
It is, and there was times she was always active, very athletic, and I think the second after the stem cell transplant, she was starting to feel good, and she was going to go for a walk. She basically shuffled, and she described it as that. She shuffled down to the end of the driveway, and she was just exhausted. And she just took a breath, and she looked at the street, and then she just turned around and shuffled back, and that was it for that exercise. But also it was a big shift for her as far as taking advantage of the opportunities when she really did feel good, from a fencing, from a training point of view, knowing that there's times when she's not going to feel good. And I think it was after the stem cell transplant and that she started to kind of relapse again. I think that's when she really started to change her mindset as far as she's not going to be around for much longer. And just setting things up around that. There was one time she went to compete, and the doctor told her that they didn't advise that. And she's like, I'm going anyways. I was proud of that, because she was going to go compete. She was going to do it her way. And if she dropped dead on the strip, then that's what happens.
That's badass.
It is. That's a good story.
Well, how are you taking all of this along the way as you're starting to see that she's not going to get through it?
Well, it was difficult for me to have that conversation. If I voiced anything around the fact that she was getting worse ultimately over time and not better, that would acknowledge the situation. And I didn't want to acknowledge it. I didn't want to accept it. So I took the ostrich approach on some level. And
the ostrich approach?
Yeah. Just put my head in the ground. I didn't want to look at it. I was doing most of running the business, and when she was healthy, she would come in and she would participate. And everyone just loved her energy. Everyone loved her energy. And from an ego point of view, there's times where like, hey, what about me? But I got over that really quickly, because everyone has that. It's just where it gets projected. And once the disease started to take hold, because just the cancer becomes a cumulative effect, any of the treatments. And so then she started having conversations about quality of life, which again, I didn't want to have those conversations. I didn't feel prepared. Of course, now my conversations would be completely different, but at the time I just didn't feel prepared. And part of my role was to be the rah-rah person, but also take care of the necessities, run the business, take care of the coaching duties, whatever needed to happen. And that's when I realized, in the moment sometimes, but looking back, just the caregiving role, how early it started. I didn't really think that it started until she got more sick, but it was in place right from the beginning. And then it became 24/7.
Who accepted it first?
Oh, she did.
She did?
Yeah, she did.
Was she mad that you weren't accepting it, or did she understand?
Both. I think we started to have more conversations around it, but not just 100% put all the cards on the table. Let's get into this. When I think back about it, that's upsetting to me now, and I want to make myself wrong for it, but I know I was just doing the best that I could in the moment, and I wouldn't change anything. And the behavior started to change a little bit around that. She would enjoy her wine beverages, and it just became the only place that she could feel good, when she was being able to
drink wine.
Yeah, just have some wine on the couch with all of our animals that completely bonded to her, and they just surrounded her. They were great charge nurses. When
I think animals know when you're sick, they step up and
completely,
get extra.
Completely, they were just pressed up against her, and that was really when she felt the best.
And were you drinking with her at this point?
Yeah, she started me down my path of drinking. I don't want to speak for her, but it just became a place of just feeling like she had some control over something.
Makes sense.
And it made her feel good. And I'm not going to say anything about it. I mean, if there was times that she said she thinks she's maybe not helping out her health because she might be drinking a little bit too much, and we just would work through it. But it wasn't anything that needed to have a conversation beyond that.
I feel like at that point, if you want to eat filet mignon and gobs of French fries, or smoke crack or whatever the hell, I feel like you're entitled at that point. When you know that death is coming, it seems the last effort of some control that you really truly should do whatever you freaking want to your body.
Completely.
I know this is a right to die state. Did you help her shuffle off the mortal coil, or did she do it on her own terms?
Probably a year before, she had started to talk about quality of life, and she actually found an organization in Switzerland.
Yeah,
I forgot the name.
Dr. Nitschke. I interviewed him.
Oh, okay, fantastic. I can look at that.
It's such a good episode.
A whole
kit.
Everything, and then you come and you stay, and she actually signed up for it, and there was a certain initiation, not initiation, but there was a fee attached to it. Yeah. And of course, I balked at the fee.
I think it's like $35 or something, right?
Yeah, I can't remember
it's
what
not
it was.
A lot. I think
it
it's to get people to just willy-nilly go get a suicide kit.
Right.
Our right to die laws are pretty messed up, that we allow human beings to suffer so immensely, truly for the people that are surviving. I mean, it's not for the person dying. They're dying, and in a lot of cases in misery. And to have dominion over that part of one's life and death is an empowering thing. But of course, you have to fight against all the people who are like, don't go.
Back then, California was not. And she wanted to move to Oregon.
Yeah,
Oregon
and Washington, and there's now several states that are allowing right to die.
That was not a conversation that I was willing to have at the time. And again, it'd be completely different now. And I've done some writing about this as well, and worked with a therapist about it. But I was always about, well, what about me? What about me? And just personalizing it, just like you said, and not being able to see a clear path to step out of the way of that, and really as a caregiver, as a husband, just to really be, as a partner, to be supportive and appreciative of the opportunity that we have to be able to work through this together. In cleaning up the house one time, I found a box, and I pulled it out, and I hear this audible groan from Amy. I think she was in the same room, and I'm like, hey, what's this box? She goes, don't look at it. And it was a helium kit. And there was a lady in Oregon, I think it was in Oregon, that was selling these helium kits. And it was basically a plastic bag, if you will, that you would put over your head, and it would attach a certain way, and then you would attach a bottle of helium to it, and it would you just turn it on, you go to sleep, and then that's it. So
I'm going to tell this.
yeah, you're gonna sound like that, and you can laugh until you inhale enough helium.
Boy, finding
to
somebody
die.
in that state seems really over the top, because I know for Dr. Nietzsche, his kits, you just fall asleep. It's a shot and then another shot, and then you're sleepy time. Then you're found sleepy time peaceful, or you're with the people around you, not with a bag over your head.
Well,
it's a lot.
Well, and I just rolled my eyes, and I just, I just put it back where it was. I just said, put it back where it was. And it was only after, later on, when I was cleaning up the house, after she had passed away, that I found the bottle. She got it from Party City, and there was a big bottle of helium that you blow balloons with. And she said that she was sitting there one day with it on her head, and the only reason she didn't do anything is because she couldn't figure out how to complete the attachment to make it work. And I found out some of this later after reading her journal, and she said that I could certainly read that afterwards. And I was horrified. I was horrified because, again, I personalized it. I'm like, she's not thinking about me, or I'm a failure. And coming home to that, like, part of me, I was like, wow,
that's what I'm saying. Coming home to that, a little intense.
It got to the point when things started to really turn. Like, 2013 was a pretty good year, and we were leading up to December of 2013, and she started to feel really good. She started to feel good. She was walking more, and she started to think about, anytime she started thinking about fencing and competing again and training, I knew we were going in the right direction. And then January of 2014, things just changed. She started to lose balance. We were spending more time in the hospital. She couldn't teach anymore. And then it became a situation where we were going to have somebody come in, and she did not want anybody to be part of it. She didn't want to be, she would say it, she didn't want to be a burden. She didn't want anybody to come in. And also there was an accepting of the finality of what was happening. One of the things I was reading is that when someone's in the dying process, which I realized that she was in after we turned the corner into January, just the cumulative effect changes the entire body, and things just start to shut down, and they just do it at different times. Cognitive ability changes, and the receding of the consciousness happens, and I started to see that. But it became a situation where I would go to work, and I was just anxious all the time. And I know my coaching changed around that time, just to where my focus was, and I was trying to be as even keel as possible. But then I didn't know what I was going to find when I came home. I didn't know if she was just going to be expired on the couch, and when she started talking about taking her own life, I didn't know what I was going to find. And also, she could have fallen and hit her head. That happened a couple of times as well. She wasn't planning on that, of course, but things really started to change. And that's when I started to, for me, have that more present realization and conversation about this is going to go a certain direction. It was April 9th that took her into the hospital, excuse me, and that was for the last time, and she was there for a week, and then I decided to, and that's one thing she said. She goes, "Don't let me die in the hospital." She goes, I'm not going to do it. And so there was an opportunity to do hospice, and if it was at home or in the hospital, and I said, no, we're taking her home. And so we took her home, set her up in this bed in the living room. My mom was invaluable. She came over, and she's so local. She came over, and she just spent, I don't know, like 2 weeks with me. We were trading hospital runs, and I had to come home and get some sleep. But when we did finally bring her home, I woke up, and there was a couch was right by the bed, but I just heard this noise, and I'm waking up, and I was very aware of her breathing patterns and everything, and I just hear this ticking, tick, 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 and it was one of our little Pomeranians, just phenomenal, little adorable creatures, walking around the bed because they would always sleep with her. And it was the fingernails on the wood floor because he was trying to find a way up, and it was tick, 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 tick. And so I was able to pick him up, and I hadn't put him in the bed yet, and put him in the bed, and he just curled up, and that was it. So then I made sure that I got all the animals up there, and some of them found their own way up there. The other ones needed to be put up there. But it was a complete experience that I didn't feel that I was prepared for, yet I was completely prepared for it by with everything leading up to it.
So is that the night she passed away?
Wednesday that I brought her home, and then it was that Friday the 18th, April 18th, 2014, at 7:51 a.m.
And were you present with her?
I was.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was important. I wanted to be there, and I know the the breathing started to change, and there's a whole process that the body goes through. I won't describe it.
Was she conscious at all at this point?
No, not at this point. One of the hospice nurses said the hearing is the last thing to go. So there was, when she first came back to the house, I put some headsets on, played some of the classical music from her playing that she loved to hear, was talking to her as I found the words and just being with her. And I remember, holding her hand and just feeling and seeing everything that goes with a human being, and in this case, Amy taking her last breath. And it was very apparent. And you could hear it, see it, feel it, and she inhaled and then she exhaled, and that was it.
What an honor that you had.
Susan, completely. And maybe not necessarily realizing it consciously at that exact moment, but completely feeling it. And just from a visceral point of view. And there was a relief. There was relief.
It's a lot.
And there's still part of me, I have to be honest, that feels, there's regret. There's almost a resentment, like I didn't do enough. And that's part of my process, completely. That's part of my journey. And but I know that I did everything I was supposed to do.
Well, I can offer to you this, that for a person like you who had a history of running and getting as far away from that kind of feeling within you as possible, that you stuck it out through the very end. That's huge. So
thank you.
Honor yourself for that.
No, I feel that, and she even said as much in her journal. She would write when she was sick, and she wouldn't write when she was feeling well. And so she had a journal that was intermittent over 7 years, and she would even talk about that. And she would talk about she didn't know. First of all, she didn't know why I stuck around, and she knows, and she said she couldn't do it without me.
It's a big deal. That must have been surreal to read those journals.
It was, and she actually, I know I shared it with you before, but she wrote a goodbye letter. And as she found it, she wrote it in October of 2013, so it was basically 6 months before she passed away. Again, I'm cleaning up the desk. Guess I'm always cleaning stuff, but I pulled out some paperwork, and I'm like, oh, what's this? And she goes, oh, that's your goodbye letter. And I was like, what? She goes, you can read it if you want to. And there's times where I wish I had read it at that time so that we could have had a conversation around it. And maybe it was an invitation for her saying that for me to read it. And then, and I said, no, I'm not going to read that. And I think I said, I'll wait for later.
I'm sure that was a moment of like, no, I'm not going to read that, because if I read that, that means it's inevitable. Yeah. And there's still that fight against the inevitable. And actually, after when I did read it, of course, it was brilliant. It was one page. It was brilliant. It touched on everything that she wanted. I think you sent it to me once. I think I read it. Yeah.
Yeah. I touched on everything that she wanted to convey. I mean, it was basically 20 years of a relationship summed up in a letter, and it was perfect. Touched on the animals, touched on a few things that she wanted to share, and it was great.
How are you doing, by the way?
I'm doing good. Okay. I'm doing good. You're making me cry.
I cried too. It's okay.
Tears.
I was crying also. I'm sure.
No, it was all tears of love and gratitude and joy and just the beauty that comes with it.
I have been with people when they've passed, in the leading up points and also in the moments, and it's it's a big honor. It's painful, but it's a big honor. She passes away, and how do you deal with that? When does the downward spiral begin? Well, the downward spiral, if we're gonna characterize it, put a label on it, started before, and as I mentioned, we talked about just really enjoying the wine tasting weekends. And there's some wine tasting weekends that we would go away and drink a lot of wine. And there's other times when we didn't. We would just do a little taste and spend money on food or just out adventuring. But then for me, after the caregiving and then the working and coming home late, there was once I was able to put her to bed, and she was medicated to the point where she would be 2 to 3 hours. And sometimes we would get more than that. Sometimes the pain would just cut through, and she had a high tolerance. So sometimes there was a lot of medication, and it did its job, and sometimes it just didn't. But there was
2-3 hour period of time where I would just sit on the couch in complete silence. Sometimes I would watch TV. Sometimes I would listen to music. And the wine drinking, it wasn't taste anymore. The wine drinking didn't work for me. And a part of me, looking back, realizes that I just wanted the bottom to drop out for a couple of hours so I could just completely detach. And that's where some of the harder alcohol came in, and we'd always have tequila around and have fun in traditions with that. But then there was other options that became available where I could actually get some drinking going that would affect my mindset and my body, just relax me, make me less conscious of what was going on faster. That started a pattern. Of basically became a nightly ritual. And there was times that Amy needed some help doing certain things. And I became really hyper aware of sounds. So like if there was any rustling or changing of sounds coming from the bedroom, I was on it right away. And I had this kind of back and forth conversation about maybe I should be more present and aware. Maybe I shouldn't be drinking as much. Maybe I should set. Anyways, that conversation was kind of there, but.
Did she know you were drinking?
Oh yeah. And I tried to pretend. When there was a couple of times when I went into, she wanted to have a conversation. Excuse me. She got up. I was putting myself to bed, and she would want to have a conversation. She would wake up, and she even asked me one time, she goes, "Are you out there drinking?" I'm like, no, I'm not. And of course, when someone said, no, they're not, and they've been drinking a lot, there's nothing they can say. But I was sure that I was in control of the situation. And I know I wasn't slurring my words, which means that I was. So, and she was concerned about that. She even wrote about that in her journal. She says, "I think I turned Geoff into an alcoholic," which she can't, but again, bearing the responsibility just based on personalizing it. And I do appreciate that on some level, that she wanted to take that responsibility, but that was all me. And just it just became a regular routine. And there was a part of me that, because I was going to say it's not my personality, but it's not a choice that I would make for myself. Something that was easily accessible, and it wasn't too hardcore. I'm not doing the hard drugs. I'm not doing anything else. I never found that stuff. It was easily accessible. It's socially acceptable.
You didn't steal any of her medicine.
I didn't. Even after she passed away, which was like, there was not. I mean, she had some heavy duty stuff.
I'm sure.
And I was like, nope. I took it back to the doctor once I knew that they weren't going to need it anymore, and they disposed of it properly. But so yeah, the social acceptance of the alcohol was easy. It was easy for me to say it's okay if I do it a little bit, and really thinking that since I never drank in college, I was always focused on other things, and maybe part of it, maybe there's a part of me that knew about the addictive personality, that if I enjoyed something too much, maybe I would have. So it was better for me not to even experience it, which I never did, except for one time when I turned 21. But yeah, then it became a nightly habit. Then it started to become a daily habit, and not just a nightly habit. I remember very vividly sitting on her corner of the couch, wrapped in her blanket, sobbing into a glass of wine, probably half tears, half wine, not really interested in it, but it was just kind of a habit. But there was a period of time for several weeks, maybe even several months afterwards, that wasn't something that called me at all.
Grief was your addiction.
Grief was it. Grief was it.
Which can be its own addiction as well.
Completely.
Yeah, if that's an all-consuming thing.
I was looking for external, outside ways to deal with that grief, because I was, again, speaking as far as going back to the avoiding stuff, I knew it was coming. There was the tsunami of stuff that was coming. Some things were building up.
Were you left with insane medical bills?
Fortunately, no. The insurance that somehow she got on, that even though the premium started to go up, even before she got sick, we kept paying it. We actually had an advocate that deals specifically with, I think it's high risk transplant situations, patients, and this person just walked us through the whole procedure about everything that's covered, and the doctors and the hospitals and everything. And it was great. It was a godsend. Yeah, we didn't have to pay anything at that point.
So you're starting to pick up your drinking to numb out, to escape. Was there an awareness while you were doing it, or was it real detachment in that point?
There was an awareness, and I didn't want to deal with it at the moment.
both things?
Yeah, both things. So there was awareness, and then it started to affect my work. It started to show up in my personal life, and I know there was friends and family that were concerned, but it's hard to. And again, it's interesting how I balk at wanting to use this word, but I have to look at it if I balk at that. But I became a manipulator, as far as manipulating the situation, and for me, it always, if I'm a happy, positive individual, it's okay, type of a thing, as far as kind of quantifying or qualifying, how something is good or bad, and of course that's personal. It's all perception. But regardless, I figured out how to manipulate the situation so I can have some wiggle room. I heard somebody talking about that with their addiction, and there was wiggle room, and I was trying to survive in that wiggle room, so I didn't commit fully, one way or the other. And that wiggle worm is the wiggle worm room. Sorry,
wiggle worms and ostriches.
It's all.
There's a title for the show.
That's the title. Yes, that's great. The wiggle worm. But the wiggle room got smaller and smaller and smaller, and that was over years. But it got smaller and smaller and smaller. So I had to choose a path, which I still didn't choose it on my own. I left that up to somebody else.
How do you mean?
Because probably 7 months, I think 7 months after Amy passed away, I had mentioned wanting to feel normal, and feeling normal for me, and I was specifically talking about being able to go out on a date, take somebody out, feel normal, just to go out, have a meal, have some wine, in a social environment outside of anything that I was doing with work. One of my friends set me up on a blind date with somebody that they knew. And it was, again, same thing. I created this almost an expectation around it. Went on the first date. She was not looking to date anybody full time. It was just to get out and have an experience. And she would allow me to quote her, but she was just looking for dinner and sex 2-3 times a month. No texting. I don't want to meet the person's parents. Leave me alone, type of thing. That's it. All, just satisfy what the needs are. And that was date number 1, and then 2 weeks later we had date number 2, and then that was it. And when you talk about game on, it was back to the
same behavior of being all in. And you're actively drinking during this time.
No, I was socially. It was social aspect.
Okay, but you weren't going crazy or blackout drunk or anything.
No, and that was never my MO either, as far as the the blackout or the throwing up all the time. Mm-hmm. It was just, I would reach that level of feeling really good. And then
it was a numbing device.
It was a numbing device, yeah.
Okay. So you end up marrying the blind date woman.
Yeah, I got to do it.
How long were you dating before you got married?
It was a year.
Sheesh, man, you move quick.
Yeah, I gotta, see what I like.
And how long did that go?
2 years as far as officially being married, but I think in the relationship for 4 years.
Do you think you jumped into that so you didn't really have to deal with all the things that were coming at you?
Yes. And again, I didn't want to...
A new distraction.
It was a new distraction. I mean, we didn't have to go down the marriage route. We could have experienced the things that we wanted to experience without... But for me, that was safety. That was a safety as far as the intimacy and also safety in a sense of knowing that possibly some things were going to catch up to me, and I would have a support network built in. Completely selfish, and yet. What
was the augur of the end?
It was the drinking episodes started to become more frequent.
So you'd started drinking.
I had started and starting to get desperate.
Desperate.
Just as far as the financial situation, but also, and there was a shift in my mindset after we got married. And there's some other people that close to me that had mentioned that as well too. I didn't want to be in that situation.
Marriage.
And yeah, should have this conversation before instead of after.
No.
And but then the behavior that was spiraling down.
Do you think you were drinking more in a way to have her say, "Hey, there's something wrong here," and make her leave instead of the other way around?
I would have showed you to the door if you had even suggested that at the time, but 100%. 100%. And it was a passive aggressive way. It was a passive aggressive way to put the responsibility on somebody else. And then I get to be a victim, Susan. That's the best way.
Sure.
It's easier. It's easier that way. And I'm joking, of course, because it's not. It all comes back.
And also the second person ever you've ever slept with.
And the second person, I was getting some notches. I'm like, let's do this. Number 2.
And you're like, I want to sleep with this woman, so I'm going to ask her to marry me.
And Susan, I laugh, but yeah. And again, it was a comfort. Maybe there's the fear.
And there's nothing wrong with wanting to be married in order to have sex. There's nothing wrong with that at all. But for somebody that has already, with boundary stuff and addiction stuff and just all of that around you, it's certainly a red flag.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And I'm all about green flags these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was a red flag. But completely. but completely.
And I'm sure that she is also bringing her stuff to the table as well. We don't need to talk about that because she's not here to talk about it.
Right.
But there's a lot of red flags throwing around the field.
And we have, and yes, I'm not going to speak for, but we have, Elizabeth and I have talked about, we've had great conversations now, and we've had we're able to revisit our relationship and the love that we have for each other still, and just everything we share and will continue to share, and we get to build a completely different foundation for a friendship that is sustainable.
Yeah.
And
would you say the drinking then created the death knell, or do you think that it was going to happen regardless?
Definitely the drinking speeded up. I had an episode where I knew that it was going to be a problem the next day. Elizabeth had an event that she was going to, and I was going to go there to support her, and I didn't make the best choices in the day. And so I was basically sleeping off, and I was just drooling on myself in bed for the whole night. And she had to operate. She had to be on for her event, and she was completely devastated and just concerned and everything. She gave me a loving ultimatum the next day, and she gave me 3 things. And she said, we set up a time to talk so we could talk about it. And I just knew that everything was going to be completely different. And my wiggle room there was none left. And she brought out 3 things. And she said, one of them was like, I'd like all suggestions. She said, I'd like for you to go find a therapist to talk to. And I said, okay. And then the second one she said is, I'd like for you to go check out a meeting. And she actually brought one up that was close. And she said,
AA meeting?
An AA meeting, yes. There's one here. And she goes, just go see if there's something that resonates with you, which was great. And then the third one, she goes, and I need to know what our finances are. And of the 3, the third one was I was most terrified about, because I was just not paying attention to the finances. I was just running everything into the ground. I thought that I had to present a certain lifestyle, or else everything would go away. Everything was going away already, but I was just scratching, clawing, and just trying to, I was in desperation mode. And I went to a meeting, and I didn't identify. I just was listening, and I wasn't listening with everything that I had to offer. But I did find something that resonated with me, and I started to get comfortable toward the end of the meeting. Didn't look at anybody, of course, because that would be, I don't belong. I'm not supposed to be here. But it was great. And then I was able to have a chance to just kind of think about that experience over the weekend, and then just start to open that door.
And did you actively quit drinking at that point?
Yeah, it was Thursday, January 18th, 2018. Yeah, that was...
And you've been sober ever since?
Yeah, sober ever since, yeah.
High
so
five.
It's fine. Thank you. It was just complete personal transformation that happens with active participation, and that just goes for anything that I'm participating in. And
did you find Zeke right away?
My main man Zeke, he showed up in March, because that was one of the requirements, and
it was therapy.
Was to go talk to somebody, and again, just to see how it resonates. For the most part, once a week ever since.
So that was 2 of the 3 requirements. What happened when the finances came rolling out?
Well, Elizabeth actually said she was shocked.
You were blowing up your life.
Completely, Susan. I mean, talk about the sabotage. I put things in place all over. If one thing didn't work out the way that I wanted to, as far as the sabotage, something else would have. And again, it's horrifying for me to think about it, but it's the truth. It's the truth. And it gives me a chance to say, okay, let's look at what some of the behaviors are around certain things. And as my main man Zeke says, let me lean into it. Let me lean into it.
And how long after that discussion did you and Elizabeth divorce?
Finalized officially 2018 in December.
Do you think some part of you set yourself up for failure with Elizabeth out of guilt for not being whatever it was you thought you were supposed to be for Amy?
I'm sure. I actually went through a whole period of feeling guilty about getting involved. It's like I almost couldn't win at that time.
Sure.
For myself, as far as feeling guilty about moving on. Whatever the moving on means, because it's not moving on, it's just continuing my
it's not linear,
my life.
I'm sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But just really being in that moment, thinking that something had to happen a particular way, a certain way, and there was there was an exit stage right option.
Were your family aware that this was happening? Did your sister or your parents say, "Whoa, Geoff, there's some crazy shit going on around you right now"?
No.
Nobody said a word.
No, and it's hard. It's hard, Susan. It's hard for people to, especially when there's the connection, the love, the family, the even my teammates, the friendship, and unless it's hard for them, it's hard for people to do like an intervention style, and also that would not have worked with me until I open the door, until I say something. And I can remember the first time that I called my mom and said that I'm identifying as an alcoholic and I need help. And that was just a completely different world for her. Because nothing was an issue with me. I'm happy, I'm positive, I'm this, I'm rah-rah, I'm not an alcoholic. And I don't look like an alcoholic, my perception of what an alcoholic is, until I went into the rooms the first time and stood up and identified. And I gladly stood up for 30 days. And I'm like, yeah, my name is Geoff, I'm an alcoholic. I'm smiling all the time because it was taking ownership of it, which I hadn't really done before.
And it sounds like it gave you an identity, albeit an interesting one, for somebody who was struggling their whole life to find an identity.
Yes. And the community.
Well, now that we are here we are today,
yes,
whatever day it is, and you are still coaching.
Yes.
And you have included, in fact, now you coach folks with disabilities.
Yes.
And you're into bike riding, and so you're really discovering who and what and why you are, it seems like. And you've been going to Zeke forever now. And
yes.
And how are you feeling?
I'm feeling great. My mom would always remind me that I told her when I was really young that I was going to live to 100.
Oh, that sounds
so
awful.
I was like, I'm on the back side of that now, but I feel great. I feel great physically. I feel great emotionally, spiritually, everything. Mm. The journey for me is finding my voice, and that I do have a voice, and whatever comes out of my mouth is great. If it's a wiggle worm, that's perfect.
I like the idea of a wiggle worm. Tell people who might be interested in fencing or whatnot, tell people how they might find you out there in the world.
The foundation that I'm in the process of starting that offers programs of support and continued sports education is called Amy Fortune Foundation, and the email to that is amyfortunefoundation@gmail.com.
In honor of your late wife.
Exactly, and she was a professional musician. She was a phenomenal athlete and an equestrian, and it's kind of the idea of providing opportunities for parts of the population that might not have access to certain activities that are very beneficial. The community aspect of it as well too.
Yeah, that's great. And fortune is traditional spelling.
It's traditional spelling, yeah.
And I'll put links on Hey.
Yeah, I'll give you the link for that.
Geoff, thank you.
Susan, thank you. It was great.
How do you feel?
I feel good.
Okay, good.
I feel good. I'm ready to go. Ready to take on the rest of the day.
Good.
Am I sweating? How much am I sweating? I feel it. I'm glistening.
You did wonderfully.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Thank
you for listening, everybody. Bye. Rate, review, and subscribe to Hey Human Podcast on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks. Bye.